Oh man, if the Saints landed an LSU guy one year and then a Manning quarterback the next year, I think they might give everybody down in New Orleans the week off of school, give them some time off of work.
I think that the Tennessee Titans should be excited about Cam Moore because if you hit on a young man who has done nothing but hit over his entire college career, then you are going to be an immediate playoff contender.
Shedeur Sanders isn't taken in this spot. 21 feels like the absolute furthest you could see him falling. I believe in Ashton Jeanty, but I gotta think there's a more valuable pick you can make in the top 5.
I think there's a possibility Shedeur Sanders falls all the way out.
Welcome to the NFL on Fox podcast. I am your host, Dave Helman. You know we had to get back in studio for a week like this. The 2025 NFL Draft is upon us. We are so happy y'all are here to join us for all the festivities. We've got such a fun week planned for y'all. It starts, well, now, obviously. We're back in studio taking one last look at the top of this 2025 NFL Draft, what we might expect in the first 32 picks. Rob Rang is going to join me in a little bit to go over his final mock of the first round. Before we jump into all that, though, I want to make sure we're on the same page here because it is a big week at the NFL on Fox podcast. We're in studio all week with the draft content you crave. We've got a Thursday night reaction show. We'll be here with all of the analysis, all the follow-up to the picks on Thursday night in Green Bay. And we're with you for the weekend as well. We will have a recap of the whole thing. We'll be here all weekend working on that, ready for y'all on the other side of the weekend. Got a lot of content coming your way. We're going to have a lot of people stopping by. I am looking forward to it. It is a long process to get here. It's a lot of conversation. It's a lot of evaluation. It's a lot of smoke screens. I think you would agree with me at this point that it starts to get repetitive, but the draft itself, 3 of the best days on the sports calendar, in my opinion. It's NFL Christmas. It's where you find out what the team you love has planned for the immediate future, the 2025 season, as well as the long-term and beyond. I don't need to tell y'all that Hall of Fame caliber players, NFL legends are found every year in the draft, as well as guys that we are going to be talking about throughout the 2025 season. And it's not just the first round, it's all 7. It is so much fun. I hope y'all will be here to follow along with us. We got plenty of content coming your way. Like I said, it does start right now with one more preview, one more chance to take our best guess, to analyze the different scenarios. And that's really what I value in draft preview coverage. I'm not here trying to tell anybody what specifically is going to happen because these teams every year show us just how little we know about their thought processes. But what we want to do is analyze the options that are available, the different paths forward, how different teams might value different strategies, whether it's positional value, whether it's instant impact, whether it's long-term developmental projects, and the way that different teams might think about different prospects differently. I think I just said different 3 times, but yeah, all 32 front offices have different ideas about these things, and it's going to play out in front of us. So less of a prediction and more of just getting ready for all of the different twists and turns that we might see on Thursday night. We talked to Rob Rang earlier in this offseason about it when we were still formulating all of these opinions, when we were still familiarizing ourselves with all of these names. We did that. We did the hard work of getting ready. Now let's take one last look at it before Thursday night. Really fun conversation with Rob Rang and his first round mock draft. So without further ado, let's bring in our friend Rob Rang, who has been hard at work on this draft class since Lord knows how long. Rob, I think last time you were on, we were talking about this process beginning late in the summer. So with 2 days, give or take, until this thing finally kicks off, where are you at with this at this point? I mean, like, are you giddy with anticipation? Are you just ready to get to the draft kicking off? I mean, what's our state of mind here as we're finally getting ready for the draft to start?
Well, a little bit of both, David, to be honest with you. I mean, I certainly get excited every year about the NFL draft. I mean, as you said in your opener there, I mean, it is the funnest 3 days of the year, in my opinion. But at the same time, there is so much buildup that I'd rather kind of get to the actual draft picks and start to analyze where these prospects are going to be able to flourish in the NFL. And kind of answer one of the questions that you just mentioned a moment ago. I mean, I will begin my process for the 2026 NFL draft basically on May 1st. I'll give myself a day or two, maybe do a little bit of fishing, but after that, it's full bore into the next year's draft.
Let me ask you this, and it'll never happen because the NFL understands how valuable it is to have this process play out throughout the offseason and have us talking about it for as long as we do. But do you ever wonder what the NFL draft would look like if they did it like baseball, where the picks are made like immediately after the season ends? In some cases, at least they used to do baseball drafts while some players were still playing. Do you ever imagine how different it might look if football approached it that way and didn't spend as much time agonizing about these evaluations?
Well, I absolutely do. I've always thought that it would be interesting if we did the NFL draft after the Super Bowl and free agency after the NFL draft. I think that a lot of times NFL teams make some mistakes in that they are just, throwing out tens or twenties of millions of dollars to NFL players that are a little bit long in the tooth, so to speak. And this is a young man's game. And so I do think that a lot of the positional concerns that teams are so willing to overpay in free agency that they might be better served in actually adding young, talented, relatively inexpensive prospects through the draft.
That's where I'm at. I really do. I love it to death. I enjoy the actual 3 days, but I'm definitely at the point now where I'm like, all right, let's make the damn picks. We didn't need the extra 3 weeks. Let's make these picks. So in the spirit of that, let's just get right into it. Let's look at your final first round mock, which you can go check out on foxsports.com and the Fox Sports app. Please do. Please make sure you go check out all of Rob's work. So let's do this as efficiently as possible. We'll start at the top. We're going to hit on the big names that we've talked about. I don't think we need to spend a ton of time on Cam Ward. I think we all buy that the Tennessee Titans are going to make him the first round pick. I guess quickly, my question for you would just be, I think listeners would love to know how Cam Ward compares to quarterbacks from other classes, and how good should the Titans feel about him being number one overall? Because from where I'm sitting, even if he's not Caleb Williams or Jaden Daniels or some of these other guys that have come out in the last few years, I still think this is a guy that a team should be excited to pick number one overall, even if he doesn't have the same amount of hype as some of those other prospects.
So that's the thing, is that I am a little bit lower on Cam Ward than others seem to be. That said, there is no quarterback in this draft class, David, that has a higher upside than Cam Ward. There is no quarterback in this draft class who made more improvements a year ago, during his college time at the University of Miami than Cam Ward did. The storyline speaks for itself. I mean, it's something out of a freaking Hallmark movie. I mean, my goodness, this is a guy that, was an incarnate wood, went to Washington State, went to Miami, and as the competition increased, so did his playmaking ability. And that in itself is very exciting. As you said, I mean, just think about the excitement that was brewing with the Chicago Bears when they selected Caleb Williams, Washington Commanders when they got into the playoffs and went deep with Jaden Daniels, the excitement of the Cincinnati Bengals when they selected Joe Burrow and saw the buzz that he was able to create for their franchise and their city. I think that the Tennessee Titans should be excited about Cam Ward, because if you hit on a young man who has done nothing but hit over his entire college career, then you are going to be an immediate playoff contender. And that is something the Tennessee Titans have not felt for an awful long time.
Right behind Cam Ward going one to the Titans, you've got Travis Hunter, the Heisman winner, the two-way star, going to the Browns. It's starting to feel like that shouldn't be surprising either. These last couple of weeks, that has felt more and more likely, which is why I've been saying for a little while, it really feels like the draft gets started at number 3 overall, and what the New York Giants ultimately decide to do In this mock, we've seen the grades on Shedeur Sanders, the Colorado quarterback, all over the place at this point. You can find somebody that has a different opinion on what's going to happen with him. But here in your final mock, you do have the Giants going with quarterback at number 3 overall. What ultimately swayed you that Sanders is worth that high of a draft pick?
He's not worth that high of a draft pick, Dave, but at the same time, it's the
That's the
value of
position,
the
right?
quarterback. Exactly. It's the value of the quarterback position. It's my familiarity, 25 years doing this, and just knowing the way that the New York Giants have valued quarterbacks that maybe others have not necessarily valued. When the New York Giants made the selection of Daniel Jones all those years ago, we basically had the exact same conversation here that we're having with Shedeur Sanders. The Giants at that time viewed Daniel Jones as a good fit for their offense and for their city. And I think that Shedeur Sanders is a very good fit for Brian Dable as the head coach and the principal play caller. And definitely that Shedeur Sanders has a unique perspective on fame at this point, given the fact that, of course, he is the son of Deion Sanders, that he has had the spotlight in his face throughout his entire life. And I think that is one of the things that has happened with quarterbacks that go to New York, whether it be with the Giants or with the Jets, that they just struggle under that glaring spotlight. I do see Shedeur Sanders as the most pro-ready quarterback in this draft class. I don't think that he should be drafted this high. I think that the more logical selection would be Abdul Carter, the edge rusher. He may very well wind up being the number 3 overall selection. But if he is, then I do think that there's a good possibility the Giants will either trade back up into the first round to select Shedeur Sanders, or that you are going to see Shedeur Sanders go within the first 21 picks. I think the New Orleans Saints at number 9, certainly the Pittsburgh Steelers at number 21. Those are teams that have huge needs at the quarterback position. And I just think that the New York Giants are going to be looking at what Jaden Daniels did for the Washington Commanders. They are going to know full well the talent that Deion Sanders was all those years ago, of course, when he played with Atlanta and San Francisco, but also with the Dallas Cowboys. I think this is a New York Giants franchise that is desperate to just kind of create some buzz around their own team. Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston are not going to create that type of a buzz. Abdul Carter, as much as I like him, I think is just going to make a good defensive line that much better, but isn't necessarily going to change the win total for this team. I think that Brian Dable basically is coaching and picking for his job at this point. Shedeur Sanders gives him an opportunity to still be relevant, the Giants and Dable in 2026.
It's such a hard thing to quantify. You said it at the top. It's the quality of the quarterback prospect versus the value of the position. And only these teams can decide what that means to them. But I did want to hit on something you said, and that kind of feels like where we're all leaning, that if Shedeur Sanders isn't taken in this spot, 21 feels like the absolute furthest you could see him falling. And obviously the possibility that somebody trades up to get to him at some point later is definitely possible. But is 21 the absolute latest draft slot you could see him going?
Well, not the latest draft slot. I think there's a possibility Shedeur Sanders falls all the way out. I don't think that he should. I don't think that he will. But I do think that there is a possibility of that happening. Look, Shedeur Sanders does not have an elite arm, and obviously there are some out there who are concerned about at least the perception that he is not the leader that you want at the quarterback position. And so I think that there's a possibility that occurs. But again, I just have seen too many quarterbacks that don't fit every team that wind up coming into the NFL and being a clean fit for their particular team. And we really need to look back to last year. I mean, Dave, I talked to 10 different teams heading up in the final days before last year's draft about would Bo Nix wind up going in the first round. And basically to a man, they all said, well, if the Denver Broncos might take him because he's a good fit in Sean Payton's system, he's not necessarily a good fit in anybody else's system. That to me is one of the things I've kind of come back to over the, again, 25 years that I've been doing this, is trying to line up quarterbacks with the play caller and the city. And so that's one of the reasons why I do think that Shedeur Sanders is just a really clean fit with the New York Giants specifically. I mean, I can imagine a scenario where he goes to New Orleans Saints. I don't know that the Saints are actually going to be taking a quarterback. I think that the Derek Carr news at this point is a little bit fishy when it came out. I think that the Saints actually are maybe even a little bit higher on Spencer Rattler than some might be thinking. At the same time, I do think that Shedeur Sanders could be successful in Pittsburgh. I think there's enough smoke there with the New Orleans Saints, perhaps even the Las Vegas Raiders with Shedeur Sanders, that the Giants basically are going to have the conversation with themselves. Do they need a quarterback of the future? Obviously. I also think that they view Shedeur Sanders as the best fit of this rookie class for their system specifically. So that's a heck of a gamble if you're going to take a player like an Abdul Carter and hope that Shedeur Sanders is available to the top of the second round. That is going to be an awful lot of stress that you're going to be feeling the rest of Thursday night. That's why if you do feel that he is a good fit for your system, you're better off just making that selection number 3 overall.
Really does feel like the decision that's going to inform the rest of this first round. And you can see it immediately in your mock. Can you imagine the Patriots' reaction if Abdul Carter is sitting there for them at number 4 overall? I feel like nobody's talking about that because nobody genuinely views it as a possibility. And yet, if he's there, I agree with you. I think he would be their pick at number 4. Did want to jump to an eyebrow raiser at number 5. This feels like the rumor of the week, if you will, because I've seen it in some other places already this week as well, which is that Ashton Jeanty could make sense for the Jacksonville Jaguars at number 5, which is what you have them doing. Seen a lot of people talk about him potentially being a Las Vegas Raider, but number 5 overall it's a new high for me. And I'm curious for your thoughts on, again, the clear ability of Ashton Jeanty as a football player versus the value of taking a running back in this draft slot.
Well, and that's the question, is that in a running back class as deep as this one, can you really justify using number 5 overall selection on one? The Jacksonville Jaguars obviously have struggled for a long time here. Liam Cohen brought in as the head coach. It is his job to be able to kind of fix this offense and get them into the playoffs. Dave, you know, I've been doing this long enough to know that running back is one of the positions that can absolutely pop as quickly as any other position in the NFL and really be able to kind of push you to the forefront. So there's no question that Ashton Jeanty has that immediate impact ability. To me, the question is whether the Jacksonville Jaguars are willing to, just to spend the dollars, so to speak, the draft capital on a position like this. And I think that when you look at the Jacksonville Jaguars, this is the team that scored a total of 13 rushing touchdowns a year ago, and 3 of them actually came from their starting quarterback, Trevor Lawrence. That's more than what their starting running back was able, to get a year ago. And so I do think that is something that you have to kind of consider here. It is, again, you're looking for immediate bang for your buck here. And when you're starting running back, Trevor Etienne has 2, with all due respect to some of the other backs on that roster. I just think that this is the easiest way to push Jacksonville into that playoff consideration. Jaguars take Jeanty, has a nice little roll to it. And I think that's exactly what the Jaguars are looking to do, is roll into the postseason. To me, arguably the best player in the draft available to number 5 is not a reach. It's good drafting at this point.
I'm so curious by this because I say it all the time. I love Jeanty. I think he's a great player. I think you're right. There will be immediate bang for the buck. He will make the Jags a better offense and a better team immediately. But it's hard not to think of Leonard Fournette in this situation, who was a similarly high pick by the Jacksonville Jags, helped them get deep into the AFC playoffs as a rookie, but only wound up playing 3 seasons for the Jags. I'm not saying Ashton Jeanty would wash out of Jacksonville, but running back picks have a way of not aging as well as other positions. It's a fascinating topic of conversation. I believe in Ashton Jeanty, but I gotta think there's a more valuable pick you can make in the top 5.
It's certainly a possibility. I mean, certainly we just talked about before with the New England Patriots and, how excited that they would be. I can, Vrabel doesn't smile often. If Abdul Carter is available to him, I do think that he would be smiling. And again, I think that the Jacksonville Jaguars would be smiling as well if Ashton Jeanty, if they made that choice. I know that it will be perceived as some of the reach, and your point is very well taken. As far as just the lack of durability at the running back position, especially for a guy who led all of college football in touches a year ago with Ashton Jeanty. But at the same time, I also just think that if you are looking for players that can make an immediate huge impact. I think that's exactly what Liam Cohen is looking to do as the new head coach of the Jacksonville Jaguars. And for my money, at least in terms of the offensive side of the football, Ashton Jeanty provides that for the Jaguars. And so to me, it was a selection that I think that makes all the sense in the world. I would be surprised if Jeanty gets past the Jaguars or the Las Vegas Raiders one selection after that, number 6 overall, because like the Jaguars, I think that the Las Vegas Raiders are a team that is just so hungry to get back into the postseason. I have a hard time believing, even in a running back class as talented as this one, that Ashton Jeanty is not a top 6 selection in this year's draft.
The fun thing about that is a couple of these picks make for some interesting choices later on. I want to get to a couple more that popped out at me. Got Jalen Walker of Georgia going 6 to the Raiders. Tyler Warren, the Penn State tight end, going to the Jets. And then at number 8, I think anybody listening to this show is familiar with Matthew Golden out of Texas at this point. But I don't know how many people see Matthew Golden going number 8 overall to the Carolina Panthers, becoming the first wide receiver and the second pass catcher off the board. Like I said, we know the guy ran a 4.29 at the combine. We know why he's a first round prospect, but what made you so confident in him to see him go this highly? Because I haven't seen this very often during this draft cycle.
Well, as you just said, the straight line speed that he offers, and the fact that the Carolina Panthers, I mean, I would argue that running back is actually a huge position of concern for the aforementioned Jacksonville Jaguars, and so that's why it makes sense. I don't expect a lot of trades in this particular draft, David, just because I think that it is lacking the top end talent, and teams are going to be really hesitant to give up the middle round selections. You look at the Carolina Panthers. Look, with all due respect to last year's top pick, Xavier Legette, a good player, but at 6'1", 225 pounds, he's got a kind of a unique frame at the wide receiver position. And again, with all due respect to the 34-year-old veteran that is Adam Thielen, at the same time, I also think if you are going to protect the investment that you made in Bryce Young at number 1, then you have to surround him with some talent, at the wide receiver position. And Matthew Golden, to me, just feels like the receiver in this class that has the highest upside. Look, I know Tetroa McMillan had the most production. I love his size. I love his gliding ability. But to me, it feels like a very similar prospect as what the Carolina Panthers currently have in Xavier Legette. And so I just think that there is a good chance that instead Carolina looks to add straight line speed. Clearly, with the selection of Young a couple of years ago, that they view this as they are not so overwhelmed by size that they are going to ignore a dynamic football player. And so, like Young, I think that Golden has that type of special ability that might be able to add a little bit more playmaking ability and help Young mature as a quarterback. And that, to me, is the number one goal for the Carolina Panthers at this point.
As I said earlier, these exercises are always so fun because they introduce choices that we hadn't considered. And Will Campbell is another example of this. I think everybody agrees he is certainly one of the 2 best, if not the best offensive linemen. It's hard to find somebody that doesn't see him going top 5 or top 6. But if the New England Patriots, who are widely seen as offensive line needy in this draft, if they have the choice of Abdul Carter and take Abdul Carter, that could create a scenario where Will Campbell takes a little bit of an unexpected fall, as he does here. You have the New Orleans Saints taking him number 9 overall. I'm curious from your perspective, if he does, and it sounds a little silly to say that this is a fall when you're still talking about a guy going number 9 overall in the entire draft, but if he does fall out of the top 5, top 6, what would be the reasoning for that? Is it purely about team needs of the teams picking ahead of this spot? or is it potentially about Campbell's arm length? I know we've made a lot out of that. What do you see as the reasoning in him landing here?
Well, all of the above, essentially. I mean, again, you look at the rest of the teams selecting ahead of them. I do think that the most logical selection and a very popular landing spot in this mock draft for Will Campbell is number 4 overall to the New England Patriots. Clearly, they need help at that left tackle position. I think that Will Campbell's a terrific football player, but the lack of arm length is a legitimate factor. When you watch him against SEC competition, Texas A&M, Georgia, both gave him problems. The scouts I've talked to that go through Baton Rouge and talk about some of the LSU players, even in practice, that gave Will Campbell some issues. Definitely when you look at LSU and they want to run the football, or excuse me, they want to throw, they primarily pass the football. You consider the New England Patriots and what I'm expecting them to do with Mike Vrabel there is I think that they're going to be running the football. Looking at Will Campbell can absolutely do that, but number 4 overall, I just think that he is not a tackle that is considered to be as elite as some of the other prospects in this draft. Now, look, I don't want to make too big of a deal about this because I do think that there's a strong possibility that the Abdul Carter goes number 3 overall to the New York Giants, that Will Campbell goes number 4 overall to the New England Patriots. However, I do also think that there is a possibility that that is a second quarterback, Shedeur Sanders, namely, that goes to the New York Giants, and you will see the ripple effects throughout the rest of the top 10 if that, in fact, is the case. Now, specifically, Will Campbell with the New Orleans Saints. This is a club, of course, that has invested first-round selections in offensive tackles the last couple of years. Taliesin Puaga was the right tackle at Oregon State the past 3 seasons, and he made the transition over to the left tackle position for the New Orleans Saints. It had some growing pains as a rookie. All rookies are. But at the same time, I think that he can be an absolute star at the left tackle position for the Saints. I also believe that he can switch back to right tackle, the position, again, where he played his college ball and where Trevor Penning, a first-round selection a couple of years ago, has struggled, frankly. And I do think that this is a Saints team that has some options here. We've all heard by now the conversations about Derek Carr and his shoulder. I think that this is a possibility of a quarterback perhaps slipping to them that might be a candidate. I think that when you look at the new head coach and Kellen Moore, Shedeur Sanders, and a timing-based offense really could be successful in New Orleans. I also think that wide receiver could be a position of concern for this club. But at this point, with a LSU, so a local offensive tackle falling in your lap and having some concerns with that right tackle position with Trevor Penning, I think you might be able to slide Penning inside or frankly just go with the better player. In my opinion, Will Campbell absolutely is that and gives the Saints the bookend tackles that they might need either for a quarterback a little bit later in this class, maybe even a Spencer Rattler, as I mentioned before, or perhaps the New Orleans Saints are thinking long-term, 2026 Arch Manning might look really good in New Orleans, just like Archie Manning did all those years ago.
Oh man, if the Saints landed an LSU guy one year and then a Manning quarterback the next year, I think they might give everybody down in New Orleans the week off of school, give them some time off of work to celebrate that. All of a sudden, I'm excited to talk about 2026 with that on my mind, but I think I keep thinking about this for so many teams. This feels like an eat your vegetables draft where, yes, we want to fixate on the quarterbacks. Yes, we prefer to look at fun skill players, but there are so many teams where I'm like, man, if there's an offensive or defensive lineman that works for you, plug that guy into your lineup, get better up front, and worry about the fun stuff later. And I think you can say the same thing for the next pick, which we just did it with Will Campbell. And the other one that I wanted to get your thoughts on, we have had Mason Graham, the Michigan defensive tackle, basically written in Sharpie to the Jacksonville Jaguars since January, probably. And here we see him take a little bit of a fall as well to the Chicago Bears, which, yes, we love to talk about Ashton Jeanty to Chicago. Yes, it would be fun to think about the Bears adding an offensive lineman and really beefing up this offensive line that they've worked on in the offseason. But this does feel like it would be a no-brainer if this guy was sitting there in a place where nobody really expects him to be on Thursday night.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, again, if there is a second quarterback come off the board in the top 5, as I have here with Shedeur Sanders going to the New York Giants, and there are going to be ripple effects. There's going to be some really good football players who are going to slide down the board. Again, I think that Mason Graham to Jacksonville Jaguars makes all the sense in the world. That said, I just don't know that it actually changes the standings in the AFC South as much as a dynamic running back might provide for that club. And so if a Mason Graham happens to fall in this draft, and just like we talked about a moment ago with Will Campbell, and there's some concerns about Will Campbell's arm length, and that may cause him to fall down the board a little bit. The depth of this year's defensive tackle class, in my opinion, could force some of these top-rated defensive tackles to fall down the board a little bit as NFL teams just say, hey, we, rather than eating our vegetables, as you just said, we want to have a little bit of dessert in the first round and then worry about those, the vegetables a little bit later. And so I do think that there's a possibility that Mason Graham slips down the board a little bit. Look, he's my favorite defensive tackle in this class. I think this defensive tackle class is extraordinary. To me, Mason Graham is one of the very few safe prospects. I mean, he plays the ball, or he plays the game the way that you want a defensive tackle to be able to play the game. Alert, physical, active, violent. You check on basically every single box that you want with him. That's why I think if the Chicago Bears are sitting there at number 10 overall, I think that they're a candidate, considering all the moves that they've made in free agency, as aggressive as they were, that they basically would be sitting back, basically just kind of, excited about the possibility of a player like Graham falling into their lap and making him their selection number 10 overall. To me, this is the absolute floor for Mason Graham.
That's what I'm about to ask you is, again, for a guy that most everyone sees as a consensus top 5 or top 6, it's hard to imagine the fall going this much further, which 10 still seems like a perfectly valid draft slot. I love the idea of that being considered a fall for some of these guys. All right, there's a couple more I want to get to. We're not going to hit every pick in this first round. Please, if you want to see the rest of it, please go check it out, foxsports.com or the Fox Sports app. There's a couple other eyebrow raisers that I wanted to get your thoughts on. So I'm going to jump just a little bit to the number 20 pick, the Denver Broncos taking North Carolina running back Omari Hampton, which I don't think that in itself is a surprise. Most people talk about Hampton as the second best running back in this class. We know Sean Payton is looking for offensive playmakers one way or another. I'm just curious, from your perspective, what is it about Hampton that makes him such a logical fit for Denver? What is it about his skill set that's exciting to see him suiting up with the Broncos potentially this fall?
Well, when I watched the Denver Broncos this last season, I believe it's it's based on his last name, but Jaleel, the running back. To me, he possesses the speed that Omari Hampton, and at 6'1", 220 pounds, also possesses. But he is a little bit more of the flash and dash kind of a game. I think that they already have that type of a back in place. So I think that the Denver Broncos, if they are truly going to complement the unique style of offense that the Saints have brought in with Bo Nix, then you want a guy who has some size, has some pounding ability, and then you also want a back that, if you just want to go traditional kind of I formation kind of stuff, kind of revert back to the 90s, early 2000s, and just control the line of scrimmage and slow down the explosive offenses that you see in the rest of the AFC West division, then you've got to be able to just run the ball right down the team's throat. And so while I'm excited about the possibility of, say, a Travion Henderson for the Denver Broncos, even a Quinshawn Judkins, his Ohio State teammate for the Denver Broncos, to me, Omari Hampton is the number 2 back in this class. He would be the number 1 back in most classes. But again, as we talked about before with Ashton Jeanty, who I have going number 5 overall, I just think that he's a special player. I think that Omari Hampton is also a very special player who has the size, the speed, the hands out of the backfield. Again, the size to be able to be an effective pass protector, pick up some blitzes. To me, he feels like a hand in glove kind of a fit for the Denver Broncos. There are other backs in this class that also fit in Sean Payton's offense, but I don't think that any of them have the upside that Hampton has, and therefore justifies an investment as early as number 20 overall in a running back.
So the $1 million question in this first round right now is, do we see more than 2 quarterbacks go off the board in the first 32 picks? Your answer to that question is yes. The very next pick, 21 overall, you have the Pittsburgh Steelers taking Jaxson Dart out of Ole Miss. My question for you is, much like Shedeur Sanders, and I think I can guess at your answer here, is Dart worth this draft slot? And if he is, what about his fit with the Steelers is appealing to you? I can't quite get my hands around Jaxson Dart because I'm hearing everything from potential top 10 pick to sliding out of the first round entirely. So if this is a landing spot for him, how much sense does that make, and how good is the fit with the Steelers?
I think it makes an awful lot of sense for the Pittsburgh Steelers and maybe a few other clubs, but certainly not for every team in the NFL. As we talked about before with Shedeur Sanders, I think that there are some fits with a certain number of NFL teams, but that if you are just grading for the league, then Shedeur Sanders is a borderline first round selection. And I personally have a second round grade on Jaxson Dart. However, with Jaxson Dart specifically, I see all the traits. I see the size, I see the arm strength, certainly the production, the SEC against elite competition. All that is very exciting. And I'm sure that you and many of our listeners, and thank you, by the way, for all the listeners and readers of that mock draft on foxsports.com. Thank you so much for all of your support. With Jaxson Dart, everybody has heard of the fact that Lane Kiffin's offense at Ole Miss is a relatively simple system. He basically is being asked to make one read. He is taking almost every single snap out of shotgun, so he is making half the reads in twice the amount of time as most quarterbacks. Obviously, that is a concern for NFL teams. They're going to be asking quarterbacks to come, sometimes take snaps from under center and be able to make 2, 3, 4 times as many reads. However, with Arthur Smith as the offensive coordinator of the Pittsburgh Steelers, with the big play wide receivers the Pittsburgh Steelers now have, obviously Pickens as well as DK Metcalf, I do think that you're looking for a quarterback who can just flat sling the ball over the top, and I think that Jaxson Dart can do that. And when you look at his fit with Arthur Smith as the offensive coordinator, look, Arthur Smith is known for valuing quarterbacks that can run the football. Again, everybody talks about Jaxson Dart and what a pristine passer he is. They just kind of gloss over the fact that he ran for over 1,500 yards, that he had 14 rushing touchdowns over his career, that he is a very capable, very physical, very alert runner. So I do think that Jaxson Dart would be a good fit with the Pittsburgh Steelers specifically. I think that Shedeur Sanders, frankly, would be a good fit for the Pittsburgh Steelers. He is not as good of a deep ball thrower as Jaxson Dart is, at least in my opinion. But he does get the ball out of his hands very quickly. I think that he is the most pro-ready quarterback in this draft class, as I mentioned before. I would be stunned, Dave, if the Pittsburgh Steelers don't take a quarterback, whether it be Shedeur Sanders or Jaxson Dart, or hell, even a guy like a Tyler Shook or even a Jalen Monroe. I think that the Pittsburgh Steelers are going to be taking a quarterback at number 21 overall or in a slight trade down because they don't have that second round selection because of the trade for DK Metcalf. And right now, their quarterbacks are Mason Rudolph and Skylar Thompson. I think this is a proud franchise that is not going to accept the possibility of a 3 or 4 or 5 win season next year. And that's exactly what they are going to get if they don't get a quarterback from this draft class, or possibly Aaron Rodgers or a trade, but somebody who is not currently on the franchise's roster. If they don't find some kind of quarterback, this is a team that's going to absolutely struggle next year. And I just don't think that that's acceptable in Pittsburgh.
It is hard to imagine Omar Khan, the general manager in Pittsburgh, and Mike Tomlin leaving their fate to Aaron Rodgers' ultimate decision when you have a chance at a quarterback. That was going to be my question as well. Mason Rudolph, Skylar Thompson, the only other quarterbacks on the roster if Aaron Rodgers doesn't wind up there. Is Jaxson Dart ready to potentially start week 1? Like, do you feel that you said he was pro ready? Do you feel like he could be capable of doing that quickly? Or is he a guy that needs a little bit more seasoning, which if I'm a Steelers fan, maybe that makes me nervous given the other options on the roster?
Yeah, it should make you nervous. I think that Shedeur Sanders is pro ready. Jaxson Dart, I think ideally you'd like to give him a little bit more time.
Oh,
I
excuse me.
do
It was
believe that.
should I'm so it was should I mean Shedeur, yes. Shedeur you feel good about plugging in, but Jaxson Dart, not so much.
Agreed, 100%. I do think that that Arthur Smith system in Pittsburgh does make this a little bit easier. Again, I think that this is a team that's going to want to run the football. I think it was 11 of the Steelers' 30 visits that they've had with the final prospects building up to the draft were spent on running backs. So, I do think that this is still going to be a Pittsburgh Steelers team that's going to want to run the football and throw play action passes over the top to those two big dynamic wide receivers, as well as a talented tight end in that system. So I think that you can get away a little bit from some of the complexities that most NFL teams are going to ask of these young quarterbacks. And that's why Jaxson Dart could be successful there. I don't think that he should be viewed as a first year NFL starter for most clubs. But again, I do think that he could be effective there. And again, I think that Shedeur Sanders could be effective in most teams just because of his awareness and the best accuracy of any quarterback in this class, including presumptive number one overall selection Cam Ward.
One last question for you on this. I asked you what you thought Shedeur's floor might be in terms of draft slot. What do you think of Jaxson Dart's ceiling? Because again, it is the silly season. I'm not buying anything I'm hearing, but you can't help but notice people talking about him as a potential quarterback for the New Orleans Saints. It's tough for me to believe. Is that realistic? How highly do you think Jaxson Dart could wind up going, or is 21 like right where the conversation starts, in your opinion?
I think it's where Jaxson Dart makes the most sense is in that 21 Pittsburgh Steelers to the top portion of the first round. I think the Cleveland Browns would make some sense for him just because of the arm talent that he possesses. The New York Giants that we talked about a moment ago. I also think the Las Vegas Raiders. We're talking about ceiling. This is a Las Vegas Raiders team that, of course, made the big trade for Geno Smith, reuniting Geno Smith and Pete Carroll. However, if you're looking in the long term for the Las Vegas Raiders, and let's say that Ashton Jeanty is off the board, I personally think that Pete Carroll is going to just be enamored with the upside of a guy like a Jalen Walker. His ability to be an edge rusher as well as play a drop linebacker position. To me, again, I think Pete Carroll is going to be really excited about that possibility. However, we're talking about true ceiling. If you see Cam Ward go number one overall, as we all expect, if you see Shedeur Sanders go number three overall, as at least I am projecting here, and I'm not alone on this, definitely have some NFL sources there saying that this could happen. And as a scout for the BC Lions, the Canadian Football League, I have been, afforded the opportunity to go to an awful lot of football games, and I've seen some of the New York Giants scouts that are going to a lot of the college football teams in what used to be the Pac-12. And so, again, I know that the Giants absolutely have been scouting Shedeur Sanders and the rest of the Colorado Buffaloes very, very closely. So that's why I believe there's possibility there. If those two quarterbacks come off the board, the top three, if the New Orleans Saints or Las Vegas Raiders, Saints at number 9, the Raiders at number 6, are concerned about the long-term future of their franchises, Jaxson Dart has all the traits that you're looking for. And we saw it the Atlanta Falcons, and I mentioned the Atlanta Falcons, and obviously their bold move a year ago, Michael Penix, after making the big decision to bring in Kirk Cousins. I think that the New Orleans Saints might be looking at that as like, wow, that may have been a move that some in the media kind of scoffed at a year ago, but NFL teams thought maybe this is just how you do business in 2025 is you have to be playing ahead at the quarterback position. So in terms of ceiling, I think Jaxson Dart's ceiling is absolutely through the roof in the top 10. I think the more logical scenario is have him going number 21 overall again to the Pittsburgh Steelers or perhaps in the early portion of the second round.
I needed that reminder about Michael Penix Jr. and Bo Nix for that matter as well, because I don't think that was truly on my radar, at least not in the draft slots where they ultimately went. I mean, if you told me they were going to be first round picks, that's one thing, but top 12 picks, I definitely wasn't ready for. So that's the whole point. Head on a swivel. expect the unexpected, and we'll figure it out on Thursday night. Like I said, there's 10 more picks in this mock. Please go check them out if you want to on foxsports.com, the Fox Sports app. We would appreciate it. Special shout out. If the Kansas City Chiefs can land Josh Simmons at 31 overall, I'm calling that a slam dunk for the 2025 first round. But as I said, we'll see what happens Thursday night. I'm just glad we finally get to see these picks come off the board. Rob, it was so much fun having you on again, man. I'll be sure to check in with you once we know for sure. We don't have to do all this if, but, when, maybe, but, yeah, maybe. We can just talk about it next week. How about it?
Looking forward to it as always, David. Thanks so much for having me.
All right, man. I appreciate it. Thanks so much. All right, that does it for us. Thanks again to Rob Rang for breaking down his mock draft with us. And thanks to y'all for tuning in. Next time we talk, we will have a first round to react to. The NFL draft. It's underway Thursday night. I hope you enjoyed the action. I hope you come find us for our rapid reaction, our analysis of the first round of the draft. You can find that on Friday. Make sure you're subscribed on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts. We got a YouTube channel. Go find us on the socials at NFL on Fox Pod. Wherever you get your news, your podcasts, you can find us there. We got a big weekend in front of us. First round reaction on Friday. Draft reaction on the other side of the weekend. It's finally here, y'all, and I am so ready for it. Thank you so much for checking us out. Come find us again later this week. Until then, as always, I appreciate it so much, and I will talk to y'all next time.